One of my favorite things in the world to do is watch Friends. I know it's been off for years and years. It's not even around, but I still find myself binge watching old episodes. And I was thinking about this today and thinking, it's the predictability of the friends in the circle, right? You have Chandler with his quirkiness, Monica with her type A of just everything has to be so neat and tidy and organized. It's Phoebe's ability to make you laugh at her silly songs. Ross always comes in with those smart comments, and Joey and him and his food, like it is just so hilarious. And of course, Rachel, she just brings everybody together, and it's just such this beautiful, cohesive team of people. And it's why I wanted to come on and share with you today that I have an opportunity for you to find your friends in the content creation space. So if you are thinking about creating your first or your next digital course, I don't want you to miss this opportunity because Amy Porterfield just opened the doors for registration for her Course Confident Bootcamp. And I'm actually offering a special bonus for anyone that registers for the Course Confident Bootcamp through my special link. So I want you to go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp to register. That's crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp. And what you're going to find when you get there is I have this special bonus private podcast series. It's called Money Mindset for Creators. So I want you to go register for Amy's bootcamp, download the podcast, and immediately start listening to it, because what this training is set up to do is to help you get your mind right about monetizing your content, making money so that you can fuel your content creation dreams. So go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp to register for Course Confident. And I cannot wait for you to find your friends and find the people that will be there for you. Do you see what I did there? Yeah, nice little friends segue connection. Go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp. And I cannot wait to see you inside. Okay, let's get into today's episode. Are you ready for a good behind the scenes of what actually goes into creating this podcast every week? I know you said yes, right? Like I know that y'all are some of the biggest fans of behind the scenes and me sharing what actual processes look like for creating my podcast content. So today, we are actually going to walk through two very important pieces of the profit media puzzle that keeps this podcast on track, ahead of schedule, and how I just never run out of ideas. And honestly, I don't even have weeks where I stress about, oh my gosh, what am I supposed to talk about this week? And what's the process going to look like? Because having done this for more than 3 years now, we have some incredible processes in place that I'm going to share with you here today. So let's get right to it. Welcome to the Profit Podcast, where we teach entrepreneurs how to start, launch, and market their podcast. I'm your host, Crystal Profit, and I'm so excited that you're here. Thanks for hanging out with me today, because if you've been trying to figure out the world of podcasting, think of this show as the time-saving shortcut you've been looking for. So let's get right to it, shall we? I'm really excited about today because I have just gotten nerdier and more organized the more that my podcasting journey has unfolded. I'm going to be the first to tell you, as organized as I am today, my beginner podcast self is like, thank goodness you figured this out, because we were struggling. Okay. I was really struggling at the very beginning of my podcast journey to keep everything organized, to find a system that actually works with how my brain works and like how I love to keep things organized, but it's kind of like a mixture of trying out many different platforms. We're going to get to that. I have two very specific things that I'm going to share with you today. Two platforms, don't worry. They're both free, okay? I'm not going to tell you that you got to go invest hundreds of dollars in something. Nope. The two things that I use right now today are 100% free, but I think it's important that you keep an open mind, especially if you're just getting started, that what I share today may work for you, or you may get in there and start messing around with a few different kinds of software, or maybe a mixture between an analog and digital format, whatever works for you. But I think it's important that you keep trying new things, because that's really all that I've done. I have watched many content creators over the years, from podcasting to social media people to YouTube. And I really study how other people create content, whether they're sharing it openly or I'm just like creeper stalking them and like trying to figure out exactly what they're doing. I have just been a student of watching what other people who are very successful, and some of these are my mentors, some of these are just people I look up to that run businesses that I would love to have one day. And so I just used a combination of what they do really well and how I actually function, which I think a lot of people don't take that into consideration when they're first getting started in their online business, right? Like, I am a very visual learner, but I also know that I think best and I create content best in bullet points. Okay. Like, whenever I create, I'm looking at the content that I planned out for this episode right now. Y'all, it's all in bullet points. There's not huge chunks of paragraphs or look, I don't do that whenever I am planning content and getting ready to record something, because that's not how my brain works. Like, I'm a skimmer. Like I said, I'm a visual person. I want to be able to go boom, boom, boom. I talked about this thing and now I need to talk about this thing. And it just helps me better. So I wanted to get that out first and foremost, that the system I'm going to share with you today is going to help you keep track of your podcast content, but it's what I have learned works best for me. And this can also be something that you apply if you are a solo podcaster or you're working with a team of people. Because I know there's many people in this audience that you don't have a whole team of people. It's just you. You're a solo podcaster. You're a solopreneur. You're doing a lot of things. You're wearing all the hats. Well, what I'm sharing with you today can be used by yourself, or it could also be a system that you can use if you have a virtual assistant or a project manager or someone else that you eventually want to bring onto your team. If you start doing these things now, I promise you it will be 10 times easier to train someone and show them what you do, because then they can actually help you. I can tell you from personal experience, I had someone come onto my team. She was a project manager and she helped me out for several months. And we kind of developed a system together that now she's no longer with me. Like, I wish her the best. She's doing incredible things in her business, but she absolutely helped me organize and streamline my business. And this is actually what she's doing for other entrepreneurs. But oh my gosh, I was so lost without her. I was so lost. I was like, I think I have a system, but I'm not really sure. This is kind of put together. And she helped me really figure out where I needed to be more organized, but also how I can hold myself accountable. And the number one thing that I learned in doing that is I need a deadline. Y'all, I need a deadline. Even though I know this podcast comes out every Tuesday and Thursday, I need something to hold me accountable, almost like I'm saying on paper in quotes, right? Like on paper, because that means that I see it. Going back to the visual aspect, I can see it on my task calendar. Like, hey, what are you doing? Like, it's Wednesday and you haven't even recorded the episode for next week. Well, you better get on it, right? You better do some time management ninja skills and make it happen. So this is why it's so important to keep track of your content. It's going to help you stay on track, but it's also going to help you have better strategies. I know so many of you are asking me about podcast monetization. You want to get started with affiliate marketing. You want to get started promoting all these other products you love. But if you are just showing up every week and just recording your podcast and hoping for the best, that's not a strategy. That's just you recording your podcast. I'm trying to help you think bigger about the content that you're creating and not just showing up every week just because, right? Okay, so I want you to think about strategy, how to keep track of your content, and just keep in mind that this is me 3 years into my podcast journey, and you don't have to do all the things I'm going to tell you, but it's a great place to get started. And like I said, the resources I'm sharing with you today are free. Okay, so there's no excuse. There's no like, oh, you have all this money to invest. Nope, it's free. It's free, 50 free. Okay, all right. So I wanted to tell you about some current resources that I have that I'm going to have in the show notes. So crystalprofit.com/episode 265. I'm going to link to some YouTube videos and other podcast episodes that are going to be really helpful that kind of show visually how to use, I'm going to be talking about Google Sheets, right? So you're like, Crystal, what resources, what platforms are you talking about? I'm using Google Sheets, y'all. I'm not using anything, like I said, crazy expensive. It's free. Google Sheets, and I'm going to be walking you a little bit through Asana. So Asana is a project management tool that I used. I've actually tried several of them, and this is the one, it just jives with me. It works with my brain. I can use it on my phone. I can use it on the go. If I have an idea, it just really, really works for me. I know there's a lot of other ones out there, but this is the one I'm going to use and walk you through today, how I use it in my podcast. So if you use a different project management tool or you're trying another one out, just kind of adjust it to how a lot of these are very similar. They just may have a different process or workflow. So are y'all ready? I'm really excited. Like I said, the content planning, all this creation stuff, didn't used to get me excited, but I think it's because it was very chaotic, and now it's more like a controlled chaos situation because I have it in Google Sheets and in Asana. So let me just walk you through what typically happens whenever I go to record a podcast. So this episode today, episode 265, what I did first and foremost before I ever sat down and started recording, and if you've been around here a while, you know that this is how I operate when I record this show. I do some sort of planning. I typically do this in my notebook. I'm a journaler. I will write first thing in the morning, but that's not how this happened today. I actually did a lot of the planning for this episode in Asana, but before we get there, I went to my Google Sheet and I'm looking at, okay, I already recorded this week's episodes. Those are good. Those are published. What is the next podcast episode that I need to record? And it's today. It's the one that I'm recording right now. So I saw, okay, the episode is going to be airing on Tuesday, June 22nd, 2021, okay, and it's going to be episode 265, and I need to talk about how I streamline my processes, and it's going to have a title kind of like Tracking Your Podcast Content.
Being a woman in business comes with its own unique set of challenges, but also so many opportunities. We get ahead by leaning in to what makes us different from business as usual. I'm Samantha Hartley, host of Profitable Joyful Consulting, inviting you to a special 6-episode series exploring the experience of being a woman in business. You want to hear from women consultants who've hit $1 million, who sell 6-figure engagements, or who've broken their own revenue ceilings? Yeah, those are my clients, and they'll be sharing too. Join me for 6 must-listen episodes that tackle key challenges for women consultants.
Follow Profitable Joyful Consulting on your favorite podcast app.
How do I know all of this stuff? It's in my Google Sheet. So I wanted to tell you how I have this Google Sheet, where it came from, and all the things. So first and foremost, there is an incredible episode of the Online Marketing Made Easy podcast. I'll link to it in the show notes. But Amy Porterfield did her episode on creating a content calendar. So I went and I downloaded this Google Sheet that she had. It's like a link to it and you make a copy and all the things. And what I have done is created my own version of that. So it's kind of a little bit similar to what she originally had, but I have tweaked it and changed it to use it as my own. And so I'm going to link to that in the show notes. Again, crystalprofit.com/episode 265. But I wanted to walk through all of my columns in the Google Sheet. And I wanted to walk you through why I do them, right? Because you're like, Crystal, this is a podcast. Why are you going to walk through them? Well, I promise everything that I'm going to talk about today, you don't have to see it. I will probably do a YouTube video on how all of this works, but I wanted to just tell you why the columns that are in this Google Sheet are so freaking important to staying on track. So first and foremost, and everybody's seen a Google Sheet, an Excel spreadsheet, you know what a spreadsheet looks like, right? So in all of the different columns that go across the screen, what I love about this one in particular is that I keep everything, each tab in this Google Sheet, because now it's like, it's a project, right? It's not just one continuous sheet that I have to scroll for miles and miles to get to what I'm currently working on. I hate that. I had an accounting job way back when in my corporate days. We had all these different spreadsheets, and different accountants and different project managers like to have their spreadsheet set up a different way, which drove me bananas. I wanted to have like just one template. Everybody uses one template. That way I know where to look for what number and all the things. But what I like to do is I have all the different tabs at the bottom of the screen are separated into quarters. So what I will do at the end of every year when I'm like wrapping things up in December, I will create the entire content calendar for the next year. I don't do all the fancy things and make it all like beautiful, but I will at least have like the rough skeleton of what it needs to be for the next year. And I separate them into quarters. So there's 4 quarters in the year. Hang on, let me open up. I have my Google Sheet right here. So I have January to March 2021, April to June 2021, July to September 2021, and October to December. So now when I can click on any one of these tabs and I can see 3 months at a time, which is how I operate in my business anyway. I'm not thinking 6 months from now. I'm not thinking a year from now all the time. I am always thinking, what's going on this quarter? What's going on in the next quarter that like here we are, we're in June, we're about to wrap up quarter 2. What do I need to do to prepare for quarter 3 of 2021? So I love having all of these separated into quarters because it's less overwhelming that way. If I had a spreadsheet that had from January to December and I had to keep track of where I was every time I was going to record, y'all, it would just be insanity. It would be insanity to have that much information staring at me all the time. Like, oh, I haven't done any of this stuff. But if I look at it for 3 months, I can totally handle that. So that's the first and foremost thing that I wanted to tell you, but I love having it categorized by quarter so it's not as overwhelming. Now I'm going to walk through the columns. So the first column that I have is the day of the week that the episodes will be published. This is really cool, especially for those of you that publish once a week. You only have 4 weeks in a month that you're going to be putting out an episode, right? If you only publish on Tuesdays, there's typically only 4, maybe 5 Tuesdays in a month. So you would only be looking at 4 rows for January, 4 rows for February, and 4 rows for March. That's 12 rows of stuff. Right? You're not looking, like I said, you're not looking at 50 things on the page and it's all overwhelming. If you're just looking at 12 rows of stuff, you're like, oh, this is doable. I can do 12 episodes in the first quarter of the year. Do you see what I'm saying? It's less overwhelming when you can see everything, even if, and this is the big part, even if those sections of your content calendar haven't been filled out yet, all you have is this is the day of the week it's going to get published and this is the episode number, that's all you need to not feel that overwhelm. Because if you can see at a glance, oh, the next quarter is coming up, I only have 2 episodes planned, I could plan 10 more episodes over the next 2 weeks and bam, I have my next quarter of my content planned. That's really the reason why I want you to baby step into this, is to have an idea of what you're going to be talking about over the next few weeks, the next quarter, if you want to plan that much in advance, because then that overwhelm of, I don't know what to talk about, or I don't know what's coming up, like I have no idea, I just got to keep my head down and publish every single week. This is how we minimize that overwhelm. I want to give you the opportunity to be able to look at a glance and say, oh yeah, we have a promotion coming up in July, so I'm going to make sure that I talk about these certain things because then it'll be less overwhelming and I won't feel like it's last minute, like, oh crap, I forgot. I got to go back and talk about that. Okay, so that is first and foremost. I want you to have the day of the week that you publish. That's what you're going to have in the column. And then what I have done is I went and hid all the other days. Like I did one of those like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, all from Monday to Sunday. I went all the way, I guess I should say Sunday to Saturday instead of Monday to Sunday, but that's how all my planners are. I always, my planners start with the Monday first, because that's how my brain operates. And then you have the weekends at the very end. But I categorized everything by the day of the week and I went all the way down the spreadsheet and then I went and hid. I'm like, oh, I don't publish anything Monday, Wednesday. Like I went and hid all the different rows that I don't need, because we're trying to make this as less overwhelming as possible. Is that the right way to say that? The least amount of overwhelm as possible. You get what I'm trying to say, right? We don't want it to be overwhelming. We want it to be very simple, clean, and clear. So when I want you to be excited. Y'all, this is how I stay excited about my content. It doesn't stress me out to be like, oh crap, I wrote that down somewhere that I was going to talk about that. Where did I write it? I know exactly where to go every single time I want to produce a new episode. So you have your day of the week and then the actual published date. The only reason why I'm able to sit here and look at this and say, okay, on Tuesday, June 22nd, 2021 is when we're putting out episode 265 is because I have it in my spreadsheet. Okay. If I were to ask you, hey, when is your episode 300 dropping? I would not be able to tell you if I did not have it in my spreadsheet. Okay. So I want you to be thinking about these things and seeing which pieces of this make sense for you. Have your day of the week, have your published date. Now let's talk about the next column. I have a column that's titled topic or title. I know, titled, topic, and title. You know what I mean, right? It's the title of an episode, or this is usually the topic that I'm planning to talk about. And sometimes I will just go ahead and blurt out like this is the working title of an episode, but it's usually not what ends up being the final product, because I use my WordPress plugin and some SEO keyword research magic that I'll do in the back end to create really good SEO friendly titles, but at least I have something. I really want to have, I'm going to be doing an upcoming episode about naming your podcast, because like each individual episode, because it's really something that I think that we need to talk about more. So stay tuned for that. That's all I'll say about that. But your topic and your title will help you really shape, it's like laying the foundation for what the episode's going to be. So I think it's really important to have that in your spreadsheet. So when you go to plan content, you at least have an idea of what you're going to talk about. And this is, my profit podcasting students, like shout out, y'all know what I'm talking about. It's so important to have those ideas at least out of your head, onto paper, in a spreadsheet, wherever you're planning your content. So you know you have something to talk about next time you sit down to record. So the next column is the episode number. There's a few different reasons why I have the episode number as a column. First, it's so I'm reminded what episode it is for my show notes, right? I've already said it a few times already, but the show notes for this episode are crystalprofit.com/episode 265. I would have zero, and I mean zero idea what episode we were on if I didn't have that. I don't go back and look in Buzzsprout and like say, oh, the last episode was this number. Like that's too much work. That's going in and out of too many platforms. And I really like the streamlined process of go like a one-stop shop. Go to one place. Let me figure out how I need to plan this episode, what episode number it is, what am I talking about? And then I can really go into planning. But if I were hopping in and out of Buzzsprout looking for what episode number was this? What season am I on? I would get distracted. I would get in there and be like, oh, look, there was more downloads. Where were these downloads? Like, do I need to fix something while I'm in here? I like to just keep everything very simple. So the episode number reminds me which one I'm on, and it reminds me to say them in my show notes. And I get really fired up about show notes. So I'm going to link to a few different podcast episodes and YouTube videos that I've done that are related to show notes. But again, that's why this is so important. Whenever I say the show notes, I am referring to resources that I want you to check out, whether they're my own podcast. I talked about online marketing made easy. I'm going to link to some YouTube videos. It's me taking the next step with you as a listener. Instead of this just being me talking in my office by myself, it actually helps you engage with my content on a deeper level and maybe even take that next step, whether it's subscribing to the YouTube channel, follow me on Instagram, whatever your next step is, wherever you are in your journey. But I want to make that deeper connection. And so having that episode number reminds me that I need to say it. It's really what it comes down to. And then the next column that we have in the Google Sheets, and this is a newer column. I didn't have this in all of 2020 because this wasn't available. It's a new feature for Buzzsprout users. So shout out to all my Buzzsprout peeps. If you are still looking for a podcast host, you don't have one, come join us in Buzzsprout. We have a fantastic time. You can go to crystalprofit.com/Buzzsprout to try them out for free for 90 days because they have this incredible tool called dynamic content. I am going to link to all the things that I have about dynamic content in the show notes. I have YouTube videos. I have ways that you can use it. I did an interview with the guys at Buzzsprout where I talked about ways that I saw that this platform could be so incredibly huge for people. But what I do, and the reason why I have this column on my podcast planning spreadsheet is because it helps me keep track of what piece of dynamic content is in Buzzsprout and how many times it's been out there. Now, what do I mean by that? So in a nutshell, what is dynamic content? What does that mean? These are audio clips that you can put that will air at the very beginning of an episode or at the very end. And I got to be really honest, after listening to so many different podcasts that I know use dynamic content, it gets old. If you hear the same thing every single week for months on end, they never change their dynamic content. I don't want to do that. I honestly, you will probably only hear the same dynamic content for up to 2 weeks and then it changes. Sometimes it's only up there for a week. Sometimes I will reuse some of the same dynamic content that I've used, a few months back, but I like to keep it moving. I don't like to have the exact same thing because I think it's boring, right? I mean, if you've heard it one time and you didn't take action, okay, maybe you need to hear it 2 or 3 more times, but someone doesn't need to hear it 30 times because they're just fast forwarding through it anyway. They're like, I'm done. And even if they did take action, they're like, I already did this. I don't care about this. I'm just going to fast forward through it. And what happens is people will fast forward through so many other important things in your podcast because they'll stop listening. Oh, that's my biggest fear. Oh, please don't stop listening to this podcast. Guys, no, you got to stay here. Stay here because we're going to keep bringing nuggets of wisdom to help you level up your podcast. But I'm just saying, oh my gosh, don't drive someone away with your dynamic content that you never ever change out. I like to keep things fresh and not have the same audio files for too long. And the way that I keep track of that is in my Google Sheet. Okay. So we only have a few more columns left, and then I'm going to tell you we're going to get into Asana. Y'all, we gotta hurry up, okay? Because I'm taking too long explaining this, but I get really excited about it because it's a process I'm really proud of that's taken me a long time to develop. Okay, so the next column next to dynamic content is notes. And this is not anything sexy. It's not anything fancy. And honestly, I don't have a lot of episodes that have a ton of notes in them. So if you create a notes column and you don't really have anything in there, it's fine. But when I do need to add something, it's nice to have that column there because it's usually related to where the topic came from. I could link to an article or a comment, or if it was in my Facebook group or in a YouTube video, I could actually link to something that I'm actually going to reference in the episode. So here's another side note is I typically do a lot of my Google Sheets planning on the go because I have the app on my phone. This is the best thing, again, why I love Google Sheets and using it for this type of content planning is if I get an idea or inspiration, I can't even tell you how many times I've been on a run and I hear somebody say something on a podcast and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's a genius idea. And let me whip out my phone and I will put it in a Google Sheets, or I may add it directly into Asana and be like, yes, I'm going to do this in the next 3 weeks. I'm going to make it happen. I assign it to myself, put a deadline on it, all the things. But I can jot these notes down quickly and I don't have to worry about losing that idea. Right? Have there been so many times in your content creation journey where you're like, that idea just totally got away from me. I really wanted to talk about this one amazing thing. And I thought, oh my gosh, it's going to be so fantastic. But then I forgot. I totally forgot what I was going to say and I lost it. I don't ever have that happen anymore. And that's not me to like, oh, brag. But it's true. If an idea hits me, I typically have my phone or I'm close to my computer and I can just slap it in a Google Sheet and say, you know what, I may not talk about this till next quarter, but at least I have that idea down. So I think it's so important. This is my secret sauce to always keeping my content calendar full. I'm never worried about what I'm going to talk about the next week on my podcast. It's usually I have 20 ideas. Which one do I pick from? And I want this to be the case for you too, but you have to have systems in place to capture those amazing ideas when they come to you. And having a sheet like this, some sort of database to keep that information flowing freely is going to help you tremendously. Okay, last 2 columns. I have an opt-in column where if I have a very specific lead magnet, I'll usually put it in there or a freebie or something that I want to, it reminds me to put it in the planning process before I start recording because it's just like, hey, by the way, don't forget to mention this. And usually it's something I've already created. It's not like a task that's like, oh, you have to create this before this episode. It's like, oh, do you remember you created this freebie like 2 months ago? Well, you need to talk about it in this episode. Here's the link. And it just makes part of the process easier. Again, kind of like the notes column, I don't always have something in the opt-in column, but it definitely helps. Okay, the last one is link to post. I think that this is something that originally came from Amy's spreadsheet. Remember, I talked about this content calendar originally came from Amy Porterfield, and I just tweaked it to make it my own. But I never put links in this column, and I know that I should. I really should. I should have every single link to every podcast episode I've ever created, and I should have the proper title and all the things, but I just don't. I don't. It's not something that I keep track of on a regular basis, but it would be a fantastic job for a VA or someone on your team to go in and put the show notes link in your Google Sheet so you can have everything in one place. So if you're doing a Facebook Live and you reference an episode, you're like, oh, what was the link? What was that episode number? You could just go and grab it, drop it in the chat, or say it when you're live on camera, and it would be very helpful to your audience. So that's one thing I'm going to work on. I'm going to get better at having all the links in one place. It would make my life so much easier. So the last two things I want to tell you about my Google Sheet, and I promise we're going to get into Asana. I have talked about this Google Sheet for way too long, but it's really, really important. And that is, once an episode is recorded, I will highlight the entire row, right? It will say the day of the week, the published date, the title, the episode number. I highlight that entire row and I will gray it out, meaning I will highlight the whole thing. I will change it to the color gray. And this is a cue for me to know it has been recorded. So whenever we're done with this episode, as soon as I'm done recording, I will gray out the line item for this episode, but I will not change the color. So it's all gray, but then it doesn't actually get changed to a totally different color. It's one of my brand colors where it is fully highlighted only when it is 100% published, meaning it has been published on Buzzsprout. The show notes have been created. I have marketed it to my social media and it has been sent to my email list. That is when it will be totally changed to another color. And that means it is done. Nothing else needs to happen with this episode. It is out in the world. And that is how I keep track of which episode number am I on, which ones have I recorded. I will do the same thing with my interviews. I may have 4 or 5 interviews slated to happen on the content calendar. And then once they've been recorded, I will go highlight those and put them in gray to know oh, that's already been recorded. I'm not wondering, did I already do that interview? Am I waiting on something? Is that coming up? I just know, oh, that one's been grayed out. Because sometimes I'll do them out of order. Maybe I'll do one and somebody tells me about a promotion that they're having. And I'm like, oh, I'll bump you up to a closer time to one of your promotions to help you out because I'm just nice like that. I'm a good podcast host. But I love to know which ones are done, which ones are pending. And if I haven't done anything to them, then they're just all white. It's all the same color as the spreadsheet. Oh my gosh, y'all. I feel like I could just keep going on and on and on about the Google Sheet, but we got to switch to Asana. Okay. Asana, I feel like I'm not going to do you justice, but I do have a really detailed YouTube video I'm going to link to in the show notes where I walk through how to use Asana as your content calendar. So I'm going to go through this really quickly, and I want you to go back and watch that YouTube video that I'm going to link to in the show notes. Again, crystalprof.com/episode 265. But Asana has made the biggest difference for me actually sticking to the deadlines of my content, of when it's supposed to be done, when it's actually going to happen. And it helps me stay on task throughout the week. So I'm not being reactive. I'm being proactive to what I need to do every day. So every single day of the week, Monday through Friday, I have a piece of content or something that I have to create. So when I go into Asana, and I do this every month, I created this content calendar system where I know which days of the week I have to post in my Facebook group, which is Monday through Friday, when I need to post on Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn, when I'm creating podcast episodes, when I'm creating YouTube videos, and when I'm sending emails to my list. I have all of this already uploaded in Asana with the deadline in it. I have assigned it to myself. So if you are new to Asana, you don't know how all this works, I highly recommend watching some tutorials on how you can manage all this, but assigning things with a deadline is so stinking important. And by deadline, I mean the actual date that piece of content needs to be published, because then you know, okay, it's Tuesday, I need to do all this by Friday. If I have an extra hour on a Wednesday afternoon, I can knock some of this stuff out and then I don't have to worry about it on Friday. So often we get stressed out about all these things we got to do, but it's like, hey, if you find yourself with 15 extra minutes, you could actually sit down and create, some show notes for your podcast. You could at least get started, or you could finish editing that one video you were working on. Or if you have some extra time, why don't you go and create 2 of those marketing graphics instead of just 1, so you would actually be ahead of the game. this is how I stay on track with my time management. And y'all, this is especially important right now because I have 3 kids that are home with me all summer. And I do not have as much control of when I'm alone to record my podcast or create my YouTube videos, or when the house is going to be totally silent. So I have to be very, very smart, very time conscious of when I'm doing certain tasks that require it to be totally silent. Or if it's like, hey, I can edit these things in the morning because everybody's still asleep. So I have to be very conscious of that. And here's a quick example. So on Mondays, I typically create show notes for the Tuesday episode that's already been edited and it's been uploaded to Buzzsprout and the transcription is like already there. So these are the 2 steps that will make my life so much easier if I come into Monday morning. The episode's been recorded, it's been edited, it's already been uploaded into Buzzsprout and transcribed to where now when I go to create my show notes, it doesn't take me as long because I've looked at my Asana and I said, oh, I know I got to do all of these things before this airs on Tuesday. Well, why don't I knock some of these out because I have some free time? So my notes that I'm actually recording today, like everything doesn't even follow the way that I've recorded this episode because I have my notes in Asana. This is like this episode. It says at the top, it said, this is for podcast episode 265. That's the label for this task in Asana. And I have all the notes for what I'm recording today in the description. And that is what I'm using as my show notes outline. So very different from Google Sheets. I don't do planning in Google Sheets. I just have the actual task. It's kind of like the project management translation before it goes to Asana, because once it's in Asana and I click the checkbox that it's done, it goes away. I mean, I could always go back and look at all the archived, like completed tasks, but that's what I like to have Google Sheets for. I like to have that organized and very simplistic to where I can just glance at it and just know, okay, I'm on track. But in Asana, I can go way deeper into, okay, these are the actual notes. Here's some links to this, and I can put bullet points and I can do lists and links and like just all kinds of things. I can put attachments in Asana. So that's really, really what I like about it. But I can also assign this to myself with the deadline. So I know I have to have all of this wrapped up and ready to go. So it's ready to be published on Tuesday. So I know when I need to create those marketing materials or have things done for a specific episode, and I will only mark a task fully done, similar to the Google Sheets, when it's been published, shared to all the proper channels, and I have no other to-dos for this episode. And that's typically, it happens like the morning that it goes live. Like once I know everything's been published to social media, then I'm like, okay, this is fully done. It's totally done. I can mark it, I can check it off, and it will be, just something that's totally finished, but it still lives in Asana. All of my notes are in Asana for the different pieces of content. Y'all, I know this sounds like a lot. I hope your brain isn't exploding with overwhelm and you're saying, oh my gosh, what in the world did we just listen to? What just happened? But without this system in place, this is my tried and true system after 3 years. Without this, I would have no idea what episode number I'm on, how the topic that I'm speaking about relates back to what I'm currently in the middle of, right? Like this episode today isn't part of any specific promotion, but I do have some really big promotions coming up in the next few weeks. And without having the information for the B School promotion that's coming up or the Digital Course Academy promotion that's coming up in the fall, I would not know how to plan my content accordingly and to make it very impactful where it doesn't just feel like I'm creating a sales pitch for every promotion. I never want that to happen. I never want you to say, oh my gosh, I used to listen to Crystal's podcast and then it just turned into a commercial for everything that she wants to promote and I just can't listen to it anymore. Because I've had that happen to other podcasts that I've listened to, but I want to be strategic about what I'm doing. And I also want to show up and serve and add value. And I want you coming back every single week for more. So that's all I have for you today. Like I said, it was long-winded. I went way too long about Google Sheets, but I'm going to link to all of these incredible resources. If you want to see more behind the scenes of how I actually do this, I'm going to link to all the YouTube videos and the podcast episodes that are related to planning and creating content. I have one that's like the typical week podcasting. It's slightly changed a little bit from whenever that originally aired, but it's still a really good piece of content if you want to see what goes into a typical week of podcasting for me. But go to the show notes, crystalprofit.com, episode 265 to see everything we talked about here today. If you have not already, make sure you are following this podcast wherever you are listening, and we would love it if you would leave us a rating and review wherever you're listening to this episode. And as always, remember, keep it up. We all have to start somewhere. Hey, Profit Podcast listeners. Thanks for sticking around to a little bit after the episode to hear this special message, because I want to hear from you. We are starting a new segment called Fan Mail Shoutouts, and I want to hear from you, and I want to hear your questions. What do you want to know? What questions have you been dying to ask me? So here's how to make this happen. Go to the app where you're listening to this podcast right now. Go there. I'll wait a second. Okay. Now, once you're there, you're going to see a hyperlink at the top of the episode description that says, send Crystal a text message. And that's all I want you to do. Send me a text. It could be casual, informal. It could be totally anonymous. Or if you want, you can include your name and the name of your podcast or content wherever you are creating, and I will give you a special shout out in an upcoming episode. So again, go to the show notes for where you're listening to this episode right now, and it will say, send Crystal a text message. And I cannot wait to hear from you and give you a shout out in an upcoming segment of Fan Mail Shoutouts.